She sat in that cold interrogation room, her hands trembling so violently she had to grip the table just to keep them still. The fluorescent lights above flickered occasionally, casting shadows across her pale, tear-stained face. Detective Morgan slid a box of tissues across the metal table, but she didn't reach for them. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on a spot on the wall, somewhere far away from this moment, somewhere safer. "Isabella," the detective said softly, leaning forward. "I need you to help me understand what happened that night. You said there were 4 of them, 4 men, all in one night." The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating, heavy, impossible to escape. Isabella's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Just a breath. A shaky, broken breath that carried years of silence, years of shame, years of a secret too heavy for any child to carry. And then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but every word cut through the silence like glass. "They were my uncles," she said, her voice cracking. "The ones who were supposed to keep me safe, the ones who promised they'd always protect me." Her eyes filled with tears again, spilling over, running down her cheeks in rivers she no longer tried to stop. But that night, she paused, her breath hitching in her chest. That night they took everything. If you're watching this right now, please, don't scroll past. Don't look away. Because stories like Isabella's, they happen every single day. In homes that look just like yours. In families that seem just like yours. Behind closed doors where no one can hear the screams. This isn't fiction. This isn't some made-up tale designed to shock you. This is real. This is the story of a girl who trusted the wrong people, who loved the wrong people, who believed that family meant safety, and it almost destroyed her. But before we go any deeper into Isabella's story, before we walk through the darkness with her, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because these stories, they need to be told, they need to be heard, and maybe, just maybe, they can save someone's life. Isabella Rose Carter was born on a rainy October morning in Portland, Oregon. Her mother used to tell her that the rain was a blessing, that it washed away all the bad things in the world and made room for new beginnings. But Isabella's new beginning didn't last very long. When she was just 6 years old, her mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The doctor said they caught it too late. Said there wasn't much they could do except make her comfortable. Isabella remembers sitting in those hospital rooms, the smell of antiseptic burning her nose, watching her mother get smaller and smaller with each passing day. She remembers holding her mother's hand, how thin and fragile it felt, like holding a bird with broken wings. Her mother died 3 months after the diagnosis, and just like that, Isabella's world shattered into a million pieces that she didn't know how to put back together. Her father, a long-haul truck driver named Daniel, tried his best. He really did. But grief has a way of swallowing people whole, and Daniel was drowning in it. He started taking longer routes, staying away for weeks at a time until one day he just didn't come back at all. They found his truck abandoned at a rest stop in Nevada, his wallet and phone left behind on the dashboard. No note, no explanation, just gone. Isabella was 7 years old, and suddenly she had no one. That's when her mother's family stepped in. Her grandmother, Margaret, was too old and too sick to take on a child full-time, but she made sure Isabella wasn't left to the foster system. Family takes care of family, she'd always say. So Isabella moved in with her Aunt Rachel and Uncle Thomas, but the arrangement was never quite stable. Aunt Rachel worked double shifts at the hospital, and Uncle Thomas drank more than he should have. So Isabella spent most of her time being passed around between relatives, staying a few weeks here, a few months there, like a package that no one really wanted to keep but felt obligated to hold on to. And that's how she ended up spending so much time with her uncles. Uncle Marcus, her mother's youngest brother, was the cool one. He was 32, worked in construction, had a motorcycle, and a leather jacket that smelled like cigarettes and cologne. He'd take Isabella for rides sometimes, let her sit on the back and feel the wind in her hair. He made her feel special, like she mattered, like she wasn't just a burden being passed around from house to house. Uncle James was the responsible one, 40 years old, married with 2 kids of his own. He was an accountant, always wore button-up shirts and glasses that sat crooked on his nose. He'd help Isabella with her homework, take her to the library, tell her that education was the key to a better life. He felt safe, steady, like a father figure she desperately needed. Uncle David was the funny one, 35, always cracking jokes, always making people laugh at family gatherings. He worked as a mechanic, had grease permanently stained under his fingernails, and could fix anything with an engine. He'd ruffle Isabella's hair and call her kiddo, and make her feel like she was part of something, like she belonged. And then there was Uncle Robert, the oldest at 45, quiet and intense, a security guard who worked nights. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. He had this way of looking at you, really looking at you, like he could see straight through to your soul. Isabella found it unsettling sometimes, but she told herself it was just his way. He was protective. That's all. These 4 men became the pillars of Isabella's life after her parents were gone. They showed up to her school plays, brought her birthday presents, took her on weekend trips. They filled the void her father had left behind. And Isabella loved them for it. She trusted them completely, the way children do when they have no other choice. But trust, as Isabella would learn, can be the most dangerous thing a child can give. Because there were signs. Small things. Things she didn't understand at the time. Things she told herself were normal because she had no frame of reference for what normal was supposed to look like. Uncle Marcus would sometimes let his hand linger too long on her knee during those motorcycle rides. Uncle James would insist on helping her change into her pajamas even when she was old enough to do it herself, his eyes wandering places they shouldn't. Uncle David's jokes started to have an edge to them. Comments about her body, about how she was growing up so fast, said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And Uncle Robert? He'd just watch, stand in doorways, appear in rooms where she thought she was alone. His silence became heavier, more suffocating, like a storm cloud that followed her everywhere she went. But Isabella pushed those feelings down, told herself she was imagining things, told herself that these were her uncles, her family, the people who loved her. And family wouldn't hurt you. Family was supposed to keep you safe. That's what her grandmother always said. Family takes care of family. And Isabella believed it. God, how she believed it. She had no idea how wrong she was. She had no idea that the monsters weren't hiding under her bed or in her closet. They were sitting at the dinner table. They were tucking her in at night. They were the ones she called when she was scared. And they were just waiting for the perfect moment to show her who they really were. July 14th. That was the night. Isabella would never forget the date, no matter how hard she tried. It was her grandmother's 75th birthday, and the whole family had gathered at Uncle James's house for a celebration. The backyard was strung with lights, tables covered in food, music playing from a portable speaker someone had set up by the deck. Kids were running around, adults were laughing, drinking, sharing stories about the good old days. For a few hours, Isabella actually felt normal, like she was part of something good, something whole. She helped her Aunt Rachel set up the dessert table, chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, her grandmother's favorite. She sat with her cousins and played card games, laughed at Uncle David's terrible magic tricks that never quite worked right. She even danced with Uncle Marcus, who spun her around until she was dizzy and giggling. It felt like family. It felt like love. It felt like everything she'd been desperately searching for since her parents had left her behind. As the night wore on, people started to leave. First, the families with young children, then the older relatives who couldn't stay up late anymore. By 11 o'clock, the backyard was empty except for the mess left behind. Paper plates scattered across tables, empty bottles lined up on the deck railing, the string lights casting a warm, deceptive glow over everything. "Isabella, sweetie, you don't have to clean up," Aunt Rachel said, grabbing her purse and keys. "We'll get it tomorrow." But Isabella insisted. She always insisted. She wanted to be helpful, wanted to prove that she wasn't a burden, that she earned her place in this family. "It's okay, I don't mind," she said, already stacking plates. Aunt Rachel smiled, kissed her forehead, and left with Uncle Thomas, who was already half asleep in the passenger seat of their car. One by one, everyone filtered out until it was just Isabella in the backyard, gathering trash into black garbage bags, wiping down tables, turning off the music. The house behind her was dark except for one light in the kitchen. Quiet. Too quiet. She was tying up the last garbage bag when she heard the sliding glass door open behind her. She turned, expecting to see Uncle James coming out to tell her to leave it to go to bed, that he'd finish up. But it wasn't Uncle James. It was Uncle Marcus. He stepped out onto the deck, hands in his pockets, that familiar smile on his face. "Need some help, kiddo?" he asked. "I'm almost done," Isabella said, hoisting the bag up. "I've just got to take these to the bin." "I'll help you," he said, taking the bag from her hands. His fingers brushed against hers, and something about the touch made her stomach twist. But she ignored it. She always ignored it. They walked to the side of the house where the garbage bins were kept, the motion sensor light flickering on as they approached. Marcus tossed the bag in, then turned to face her, blocking her path back to the house. "You're growing up so fast, Isabella," he said, his voice different now. Lower. Softer. Dangerous. "I remember when you were just this tiny little thing, and now look at you." I should go inside," Isabella said, trying to step around him, but he moved with her, keeping himself between her and the house. "What's the rush?" he asked, reaching out and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered on her cheek. "We hardly get to spend time alone anymore." Isabella's heart was pounding now, her instinct screaming at her to run, but her mind was still trying to rationalize, still trying to convince her that this was Uncle Marcus, that he wouldn't hurt her, that she was overreacting. "Marcus, please, I'm tired," she said, her voice small. "I just want to go to bed." "You don't have to be scared of me," he whispered, stepping closer. Too close. So close she could smell the alcohol on his breath. "I've always taken care of you, haven't I? I've always been there for you." And then his hand was on her waist, pulling her toward him, and Isabella froze. Just froze. Like every muscle in her body stopped working all at once. She couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything except stand there while his other hand slid up her back, while his lips pressed against her neck, while every cell in her body screamed that this was wrong, this was so wrong, but her voice wouldn't work. "There she is." The voice came from behind her. She turned her head and saw Uncle David stepping out of the shadows by the garage, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He flicked it to the ground, crushed it under his boot, and walked toward them with that same easy smile he always wore. But there was nothing easy about his eyes. They were cold, calculating, empty. "We've been waiting for this," David said, and Isabella's blood turned to ice. Waiting. They'd been waiting. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. "No," Isabella whispered, the word barely audible. "Please, no." Marcus's grip tightened on her waist, his other hand moving to cover her mouth before she could say anything else. "Shh. Shh. It's okay," he said, his voice sickeningly gentle. "We're family, remember? Family takes care of each other." The sliding glass door opened again, and Uncle James stepped out, adjusting his glasses, his face expressionless. He looked at Isabella, looked at Marcus holding her, looked at David standing there with his arms crossed, and he didn't say a word. He just nodded, like this was normal, like this was expected. And then Uncle Robert appeared from inside the house, moving silently, his footsteps barely making a sound as he crossed the deck and stepped down into the backyard. He stopped a few feet away from them, his arms folded across his chest, his eyes locked on Isabella with an intensity that made her want to disappear into the ground. "Please," Isabella tried to say through Marcus's hand. "Please don't." But no one was listening. No one cared. She was alone, surrounded by 4 men who had sworn to protect her, who had held her when she cried, who had promised her that she was safe, that she was loved, that she would never be alone again. And now they were going to destroy her. They took her inside, up the stairs, into one of the guest bedrooms at the end of the hall, far away from where anyone might hear. Marcus kept his hand over her mouth the entire time, whispering things in her ear, horrible things, things that made her want to claw her way out of her own skin. David locked the door behind them. James closed the curtains. Robert just stood there, watching, waiting his turn. And then it started. Isabella won't talk about the details. Can't talk about them. Even now, years later, there are parts of that night that her mind has locked away, hidden in dark corners where she doesn't have to look at them. Dissociation, the therapists call it. A survival mechanism. The brain's way of protecting itself when the pain becomes too much to bear. But she remembers pieces. She remembers Marcus first, his hands rough and urgent. She remembers trying to fight, trying to push him away. But he was so much stronger, and her body felt like it was made of lead, heavy and useless. She remembers the sound of her own voice, begging, pleading, asking them why. Why would they do this? What did she do wrong? But there were no answers. Just laughter, just grunts, just the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like a drum. She remembers David next, his breath hot against her skin, his voice in her ear telling her to stop crying, to be quiet, to be a good girl. She remembers James taking off his glasses, folding them carefully, setting them on the nightstand like he was preparing for a routine task, something mundane and everyday. And she remembers Robert. God, she remembers Robert. He didn't say a single word the entire time. He just looked at her with those cold, empty eyes, and she knew in that moment that he felt nothing. No guilt, no shame, no humanity. He looked at her like she was nothing, like she was just an object, just a thing to be used and discarded. The night stretched on forever, hours that felt like days, pain that felt like it would never end. And through it all, Isabella's mind kept screaming the same question over and over again. Why? Why would they do this? Why would the people who were supposed to love her, who were supposed to protect her, why would they hurt her like this? But deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she already knew the answer. Because they could. Because she was vulnerable. Because she had no one else. Because they knew she wouldn't tell. Because they knew she had nowhere to go. Because they knew that without them, she was completely, utterly alone. And they were right. When it was finally over, when they'd each taken what they wanted and left her broken on that bed, Marcus leaned down close to her face. She could smell the sweat on his skin, see the satisfied look in his eyes. "If you tell anyone about this," he whispered, his voice deadly calm, "we'll make sure you never see your grandmother again. We'll tell everyone you're lying, that you're making it up for attention. And who do you think they'll believe? 4 respected men, or 1 broken little girl with no parents and nowhere to go?" Isabella couldn't even respond, couldn't even nod. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like her entire body was on fire, like every nerve ending was screaming in agony. David patted her head like she was a dog. "Good girl," he said. "This is our little secret, okay? Just family business." James picked up his glasses, put them back on, and walked out of the room without a single word. And Robert, he just looked at her one last time, his expression completely blank, and then he left too. The door closed. The lock clicked. And Isabella was alone in the darkness, covered in shame and pain, and the knowledge that her life would never ever be the same again. Isabella woke up on the floor of that guest bedroom. She didn't remember falling asleep, didn't remember moving from the bed to the floor. But there she was, curled up in a ball, her entire body aching like she'd been hit by a truck. The morning sun was streaming through the gaps in the curtains, dust particles floating in the beams of light, everything looking so normal, so peaceful, like the world hadn't just ended. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Every muscle screamed in protest. Her legs felt like they were made of concrete. There was pain everywhere, sharp and burning, and wrong. So wrong. She looked down at herself and saw bruises already forming on her arms, her thighs, her wrists, purple and blue marks in the shape of fingers. Evidence, proof. But proof of what? Who would she show it to? Who would believe her? She forced herself to stand, using the bed frame to pull herself up, her legs shaking so badly she thought she might collapse. She needed to shower, needed to wash away the feeling of their hands on her skin, their breath on her neck, the smell of them that clung to her like a disease. She stumbled to the bathroom attached to the guest room, turned the shower on as hot as it would go, and stood under the spray until her skin turned red and raw. She scrubbed and scrubbed until her skin felt like it might peel off, but it didn't matter. She still felt dirty, still felt contaminated, like no amount of water could ever make her clean again. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her skin pink and throbbing, she heard voices downstairs. Laughter. The smell of coffee brewing. Pancakes on the griddle. She stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the railing, listening to them. Her uncles. All four of them. Sitting at the kitchen table like it was just another morning. Like last night had never happened. Like they hadn't just destroyed her. Isabella. Aunt Rachel's voice called up the stairs. Come on down, honey. Breakfast is ready. Isabella's hands tightened on the railing. She wanted to scream. Wanted to run down those stairs and tell Aunt Rachel everything, tell her what they did. Tell her that the men sitting at her kitchen table were monsters. But when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. Because Marcus's words were echoing in her head. Who do you think they'll believe? She walked down the stairs slowly, each step sending jolts of pain through her body. When she reached the kitchen, all four of them looked up at her. Marcus grinned. There she is. Did you sleep well? David winked. You look a little tired, kiddo. Long night, huh? James didn't even look at her, just kept reading his newspaper like she didn't exist. And Robert, he just stared at her with those cold, empty eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, a smile that said, I own you now. You belong to me. Isabella felt her stomach turn, felt bile rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down, forced a smile onto her face and nodded. Yeah, she whispered. Long night. Aunt Rachel set a plate of pancakes in front of her, syrup dripping down the sides, butter melting in the center. The smell made Isabella want to vomit. Eat up, sweetie, Aunt Rachel said, kissing the top of her head. You need your energy. Isabella picked up her fork, put a piece of pancake in her mouth, chewed, swallowed. It tasted like ash. And that's how it went. Day after day, week after week. Isabella went back to school, sat in her classes, smiled when she was supposed to, answered questions when she was asked. But inside she was screaming. Inside she was dying. She avoided family gatherings as much as she could, made up excuses about homework or not feeling well. But sometimes she had no choice. Sometimes she was forced to sit at the same table as them, forced to listen to them laugh and joke and act like everything was fine. And the worst part? No one noticed. No one saw that she was barely holding herself together. No one asked why she flinched when someone touched her, why she stopped eating, why she stopped sleeping. Or maybe they did notice, and they just didn't care. Isabella started to believe that maybe it was her fault. Maybe she'd done something wrong. Maybe she'd led them on somehow, sent signals she didn't realize she was sending. Maybe she deserved it. That's what they wanted her to think. That's what abusers always want their victims to think. Because if you believe it's your fault, you'll never tell. You'll carry the shame and the guilt and the pain all by yourself, and they'll get away with it. They'll move on with their lives like nothing ever happened, and you'll be left to pick up the pieces of a person you used to be. And that's exactly what was happening to Isabella. She was breaking, slowly, quietly, falling apart piece by piece, and no one even noticed. 3 months passed. 3 months of Isabella living in a nightmare that never ended, even when she closed her eyes. Sleep became impossible. Every time she started to drift off, she'd see their faces, feel their hands, hear their voices. She'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She lost weight. Her clothes hung off her frame like they were 2 sizes too big. Her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, pulled her aside one day after class. "Isabella, are you feeling okay? You've seemed distant lately." Isabella forced a smile. The same smile she'd been wearing for 3 months. The smile that was starting to crack at the edges. "I'm fine, Mrs. Peterson. Just tired. Been staying up late studying." Mrs. Peterson didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it either. Adults never pushed it. They asked their questions, accepted the lies, and moved on with their lives. Because digging deeper meant responsibility, meant getting involved, meant acknowledging that maybe something was very, very wrong, and that was uncomfortable. So they looked the other way. Isabella started avoiding mirrors. She couldn't stand to look at herself, couldn't stand to see the person she'd become. A shell, a ghost. Someone who looked like Isabella Carter, but wasn't really her anymore. The real Isabella had died that night in July. This was just what was left behind. But there was one person who refused to let it go. Emily Martinez had been Isabella's best friend since 4th grade. They'd met in art class, bonded over a shared love of painting and horror movies and late-night conversations about everything and nothing. Emily knew Isabella better than anyone, knew her quirks and her habits and the way she bit her bottom lip when she was thinking. So when Isabella started pulling away, stopped answering texts, stopped showing up to their usual weekend hangouts, Emily noticed. She noticed everything. She noticed that Isabella never ate lunch anymore, just pushed her food around her plate until the bell rang. She noticed that Isabella flinched every time someone raised their voice, jumped every time a door slammed. She noticed the dark circles under Isabella's eyes, the way her hands shook when she tried to hold a pencil, the way she'd zone out in the middle of conversations like her mind was somewhere else entirely. Emily tried to ask about it, tried to get Isabella to talk, but Isabella always deflected. "I'm fine, just stressed about school, just not sleeping well, just having a rough week." But weeks turned into months and Emily's concern turned into fear. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon in late October when everything came crashing down. Emily had shown up at Uncle James's house unannounced, determined to figure out what was going on with her best friend. She rang the doorbell, waited, heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and there was Isabella, wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes so pronounced they looked like bruises. Isabella said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Emily said, pushing past her into the house, "since you won't return any of my calls or texts." "I've been busy," Isabella said, closing the door. "Busy with what? Avoiding me?" Emily turned to face her, arms crossed. "Bella, what is going on with you? And don't say nothing because I know something is wrong. I know you." Isabella's face crumbled. Just for a second her mask slipped, and Emily saw something in her eyes that made her blood run cold. Pain. Deep, bottomless, unbearable pain. "I can't," Isabella whispered. "I can't talk about it." "Can't or won't?" Emily stepped closer. "Bella, you're scaring me. Please just talk to me. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." Isabella shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. No, we can't. You don't understand. If I tell you, everything will fall apart. Everything. Then let it fall apart." Emily grabbed her hands, held them tight. Bella, I don't know what happened, but I know it's eating you alive, and I can't just stand here and watch you disappear. And that's when Isabella broke. Completely. Utterly. She collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking with sobs so violent Emily thought she might shatter into a million pieces. Emily sat down beside her, wrapped her arms around her and held her while she cried. Held her for what felt like hours, whispering that it was okay, that she was safe, that she wasn't alone. And finally, Isabella told her. Not everything. She couldn't. The words wouldn't come. But she told her enough. Told her about that night. Told her about her uncles. Told her about the pain and the shame and the threats and the fear. And when she was done, when there were no more words left, she looked at Emily with eyes that were completely hollow. No one's going to believe me, she whispered. I have no proof. It's been months. And they're respected men. They have families, jobs, reputations. And I'm just me, a broken, messed up kid with no parents and nowhere to go. Emily was crying now too, her hands shaking as she gripped Isabella's shoulders. I believe you, she said, her voice fierce. I believe you, Bella, every single word, and we're going to make sure they pay for what they did. Isabella shook her head. How? How do we do that? Emily wiped her eyes, stood up, and grabbed her phone from her pocket. We go to the police right now today and we tell them everything. Em, I can't. I'm scared. I know you're scared, but you know what's scarier? Letting them get away with it. Letting them do this to someone else. Because they will, Bella. People like that, they don't stop, they just find new victims. Isabella looked at her friend, this girl who had stood by her through everything, who believed her when no one else would, who was willing to walk into the fire with her. And for the first time in 3 months, Isabella felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's do it. Before we continue, before we dive deeper into what happened next in Isabella's fight for justice, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Stories like these need to be shared, need to be heard, because awareness is the first step toward prevention. Every share, every comment, every view helps spread the message that silence protects predators, but truth saves lives. Now let's continue with Isabella's journey. The police station smelled like stale coffee and old paperwork. Isabella sat in a plastic chair in the lobby, Emily beside her, both of them silent as they waited. Isabella's hands were trembling so badly she had to sit on them just to keep them still. What if no one believed her? What if they laughed at her? What if they called her uncles right there in front of her, told them what she'd said, sent her back into their hands? They're going to believe you, Emily said, reading her mind like she always did. They have to. A woman in a police uniform appeared from a hallway, clipboard in hand. Isabella Carter? Isabella stood, her legs wobbling beneath her. That's me. I'm Officer Stevens. Come on back. They followed her down a long hallway, past offices with closed doors and bulletin boards covered in missing person posters and crime statistics. Officer Stevens led them into a small room with a table and 3 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. Have a seat, she said, gesturing to the chairs. Can you tell me why you're here today? Isabella looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked at Officer Stevens, took a deep breath, and said the words she'd been too terrified to say for 3 months. I was raped by my uncles. 4 of them. All in one night. Officer Stevens's expression didn't change. She just picked up her pen and started writing. I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Take your time. You're safe here. And so Isabella told her story. All of it. Every horrible detail she could remember. She told her about losing her parents, about being passed around between relatives, about her uncles stepping in to fill the void. She told her about July 14th, about the party, about cleaning up afterward, about what happened in that bedroom. She told her about the threats, the silence, the fear that had consumed her life for the past 3 months. Officer Stevens listened without interruption, taking notes, her face neutral but her eyes growing harder with every sentence. When Isabella finished, her throat raw from talking, Officer Stevens set down her pen and looked her directly in the eyes. Isabella, I want you to know that what happened to you was not your fault. Not in any way, shape, or form. Do you understand me? Isabella nodded, tears streaming down her face. I need to ask you some difficult questions now, okay? And I need you to be as honest and specific as possible. Can you do that? Yes. Have you showered since the assault? Yes, right after. I couldn't stand feeling them on me. Officer Stevens nodded, making another note. Did you keep the clothes you were wearing that night? No, I threw them away. I'm sorry, I didn't think. It's okay. It's a very common response. What about the threats they made? Can you remember exactly what they said? Isabella repeated Marcus's words, the threat about her grandmother, the warning that no one would believe her. And these 4 men, they're all related to you? Uncle by blood? Marcus, David, and Robert are my mom's brothers. James is married to my mom's sister. Officer Stevens wrote all of this down, then looked up at Isabella with an expression that was both compassionate and determined. Isabella, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be a difficult process. Cases like these, especially when time has passed and there's no physical evidence, they're hard to prove. But that doesn't mean we're not going to try. That doesn't mean I don't believe you. Because I do. Isabella felt something break open in her chest. Relief. Validation. Someone believed her. Someone actually believed her. What happens now? Emily asked. Now, Officer Stevens said, we open an investigation. Detective Laura Morgan was assigned to Isabella's case 2 days later. She was a veteran investigator, 48 years old, with short graying hair and eyes that had seen too much darkness in the world. She'd worked sex crimes for 15 years, heard countless stories like Isabella's, and every single one still made her furious. She sat across from Isabella in that same interrogation room, a folder open in front of her containing everything Officer Stevens had documented. Isabella, I'm Detective Morgan. I'm going to be handling your case from here on out. First thing I want to say is that I believe you. I know what you've been through, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure those men are held accountable. But I need your help, okay? I need you to be strong for just a little bit longer. Isabella nodded. She'd been strong for 3 months. What was a little bit longer? Detective Morgan pulled out a recorder, set it on the table between them. I need you to tell me your story again, on the record this time. I know it's hard to repeat it, but it's necessary for the investigation. Can you do that? Isabella told her story again, and then again, when a social worker came to do a forensic interview.